Well, thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. We absolutely appreciate it. And I'm very excited to learn more about your agriculture journey. So over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited as well to just talk about this and talk about how I entered the agricultural forum, being from outside the industry. So just want to say hello to everyone and thank you for having me as part of your virtual conference. My name is Karen Schuett, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Livestock Water Recycling. Now, this water did come from manure, and I'll dig into a little bit more about how it came from manure, but I like to start off with we make water from manure. That's sort of our claim to fame. And I call myself a scientist and an environmentalist and a reluctant entrepreneur. So I'll tell you a little bit more about my reluctance and then how I actually dove into this entrepreneurial journey as we go forward. So I have been a science enthusiast since I was in elementary school. There you can see me holding a heart, a model of a human heart with my sister in our first science fair project on the circulatory system. I have always loved to study how things worked. And in this particular science fair, we actually worked with our dad to build a human heart out of plexiglass and push red colored, food coloring colored water through the system to show how a heart actually pumped. I was very excited about this science fair, my sister less enthusiastic, and I went on to actually participate in another science fair project after this and then made a career in science completely. In my business now, we have used science and technology to reimagine waste to create value for food producers through manure processing. And really, when you look at the body and all of my work around science and my training, I was really looking at recycling, reusing, repurposing waste throughout all of our ecosystems. From a very early age, I was very inspired to be a problem solver. Not only have I always been fascinated and amazed by science, but I have been passionate about water and the environment for as long as I can remember. And that passion has driven my career. Before starting my business, I went to University of Calgary and did 2 science degrees. And then I worked for 10 years in a previous commercialization, the oil and gas water treatment market. Being from Calgary, we were really focused on oil and gas. In that business, we manufactured, installed, and commissioned over 1,000 wastewater treatment projects in some of the remote and difficult areas on the planet. We worked on projects all over North America, removing hydrocarbon contamination from groundwater. This meant working, as an example, for American Airlines on the tarmac at both the JFK and O'Hare airports. So we were extracting jet fuel from beneath the tarmac and the concourse at the airport while the planes were flying in and landing. It was a super exciting project and also very stressful. Speaking of stressful, we were actually working at JFK tarmac on 9/11. You can imagine, you thought you were working in a water treatment business and you ended up, working on the tarmac in 9/11. We also worked on projects in the far Arctic Circle where we had to barge our equipment in, and we only had a certain short window of time that we could get the equipment to the location. We worked at rail yards as trains were coming in. We worked at military bases where we weren't even allowed to enter, and we had to ship the equipment outside of this, secret zone. We worked on remote islands, and we worked in rural and urban settings. So it's amazing how far an entrepreneurial career can take you. You feel like you're solving a problem for one local group, but you realize we're all alike all over the world, and really the same problem exists in every country. And one of those problems is water recycling. One day, 8 years into my career in wastewater treatment in hydrocarbons, I was reading an interview with Al Gore, and he was talking about how the wars of the future would be fought over water. Now, coming from Canada, I couldn't imagine how this could be. Water is plentiful. We just turn on the tap. We're very spoiled in our wealth of water here in Canada. But as I researched in more and more, and of course we know certain, drought countries that we read about all the time, but I started to learn that only 4% of all the water consumed on our planet is recycled for reuse.
Mm.
So it's a really shocking statistic. And what really happens is that we are moving water into areas that it's not being reused. We don't actually reuse the water as we recycle it. We move it into areas where it can be moved around the planet. And really the clouds do all of our reuse for us. It was also about this time when I learned about manure. Now, the question I get asked most often when I meet people is why manure? It's got to be the worst of the worst as far as water treatment goes. Now, I mean, I didn't come from a farming background. I didn't know anything about how manure was stored on farms and that this is what manure liquids looked like. I trained as a zoologist, so I knew how manure was made, but that's about all I knew. But truly, the first time I looked at a manure lagoon like this, I looked past the muddy liquids to see a water treatment opportunity. The more I looked at manure, the more I started to see it for what it really is. And it's actually water. In fact, those manure lagoons are 95% water and only 5% manure solids. So not only did I see clean water trapped inside manure lagoons, but I saw the value of the manure particles or the nutrients that we could use for recycling for plants. So you have to, look past the odor and look past the way things are traditionally treated and see some value inside. When we treated hydrocarbons, underground hydrocarbons in groundwater, there was no value that we could create out of extracting that. We were just an expense to clean up a site. We weren't able to extract that jet fuel from the tarmac, for instance, and then reuse it in planes. We were only able to pull it out and flare it off. And what we really always wanted to do was reuse that product we were taking out. And with manure, I saw that opportunity. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, manure contains all 13 of the essential nutrients that are used by plants. And when I read more about this and looked to access this type of nutrient out of dilute manure, I thought maybe this was perhaps the world's water treatment problem that I had been training my entire career for. This dilute liquid had these important essential nutrients commingled together. And normally with fertilizer, we see these separated out and used by plants in different ways. But the problem with manure is that everything's in there together. What we really set out to do at this point was, okay, we want to clean water, but how can we pull these nutrients out in a way that is usable by farms as fertilizer? Because what we saw here is that even with access to millions of gallons of manure, farmers were still topping up their crops with expensive commercial fertilizers to meet their needs, even though they had all this fertilizer available to them. It just wasn't in the right form to be used. As well, when they go to put manure out, farmers will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars dealing with manure. With current practices, a 2,500 cow dairy will spend over $700,000 USD getting manure from the cows to the fields. It was a very expensive, old-fashioned practice that really needed a water treatment solution. If you look at how farms are working with this waste, you can see they've got lagoons full of waste and they live right in the middle of it. You can imagine a family lives in that house right in the middle of all that manure. That's a big pig farm. And you can see all the areas, barns where the herd is housed, but right in the middle of all of it, a farmer and their family is living. All of this I learned from outside the industry through my research and through talking with farmers. And it really changed how I thought about how we could be helpful here, how my water treatment career should go, and really what this meant. You can see here just some images of lagoons that we saw. This is in California, but just massive amounts of waste that these farms are left trying to deal with. And we also learned that a dairy farm with only 200 cows produces as much manure as the city of Red Deer. In fact, when we think about that, and we think about there are a million dairy cows in Canada alone, there are 3.5 million beef cattle, there are more cows in Alberta than people, and globally there are 3 billion cows and pigs on the planet. So it really got us engaged. You can see here, this is my team rowing their boat across a manure lagoon as we went and set out in the middle to learn how we were going to sample and treat manure. We started off working on pilot scale units. We worked on a hog farm in Alberta and a dairy farm in BC, where we piloted the very first beta versions of our manure treatment technology. So right on the fields, after we got out of the rowboats, we made technology and put it right at the farm. We say we dove in, so to speak, directing all of our R&D efforts to manure processing. And at this point, we formed a business solely on clean water from farm waste. As we would soon realize, manure processing is not easy. We tried and failed at dozens of treatment protocols until we learned that the best way to treat manure was through this multi-stage process that removes particles sequentially until what we have left is clean water and 2 distinct fertilizer products. And we called that plant. It took us a while to get to plant. We went through so many iterations and thousands. We tested over 1,000 manure samples in our lab. So we are now completely nose blind to the smell of manure. We don't know when we smell like manure. When I get on a plane, I think, oh, I wonder if everyone's wondering who smells here, and it's me. I always think about this situation in science where you think, okay, you want to fail fast. And so we wanted to test as many protocols as possible to find a no, get to a no. That doesn't work, so we could move on to the next one. So we were really trying to iterate quickly and fail fast on those initial processes. It took us, I patented the process in 2010. And then our first commercial unit came in 2015. So it took us probably over a year of manure sampling testing just to get to where we could patent a process. And then it took us 5 years from there to produce a commercial product. So 6 to 7 years in total just to get to the market. In that time frame, we had also done 4 pilot processes in Canada, where we tested on various beef and hog manure facilities with beta technology and worked on those for a year or 2 at each stage, testing different protocols as we went. But it was a lengthy process to come up with a brand new innovation. Originally, we had thought that we could take a lot of the technology that we had used in hydrocarbon contamination, and specifically around diesel removal, because it's a thick, heavy waste. We thought we could use some of those protocols and that technology and bring it to this waste treatment. But as we saw, manure is very difficult to treat, way more difficult than hydrocarbon. It's organic in nature, it is dilute, it is well homogenized and into the liquid, and so it was a very difficult and sticky waste to deal with. So it was not able to be treated with standard wastewater treatment protocols, municipal water treatment protocols, and we had to actually invent our own process for manure treatment. So when I say I was a reluctant entrepreneur, I had never intended to start a manure treatment business at all. And in fact, we looked at this as another extension to hydrocarbon treatment. And we had to actually invent something new. Then it looked like, okay, now I need to become an entrepreneur and actually develop a brand new innovation, bring it to market, commercialize it, do all the things, fundraising, public speaking, all the stuff that a scientist hadn't planned on doing, but as an entrepreneur, you have to do. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he, I think, instilled it in me somewhere, even though I swore I would never follow in those footsteps. I, of course, did. You know, we try and try, but we end up where we end up. So after we patented the technology, then we set to work on building out the first full-scale commercial product. And in this full fertilizer plant, we call it, we look to achieve full nutrient capture and then clean water recovery. So I had specifically come into this business for clean water, and my vision was to eliminate manure lagoons. But as we saw, you know, we want to capture those nutrients, we want to capture value from the water. And as an entrepreneur, there's more money to be made in the business of capturing value than there is in clean water. So, you know, that was the school of hard knocks that I had to learn around, you know, how much people want to pay for clean water as opposed to how much people want to pay for valuable fertilizer or feedstock for renewable natural gas, and other things we use this for. We specifically designed our equipment for livestock producers who are looking to grow more crops and produce more food using less money and fewer resources. So specifically, we set out to find livestock producers that were looking to expand their herd size. And in most of the cases that we worked on initially, they were looking to double their herd size without doubling their land use or doubling their lagoon. So the first commercial farm we worked on in Wisconsin, he was just in the midst of digging a new lagoon for manure when he found us on the internet and actually contacted us and said, "Can I use this instead of a lagoon?" That led to a beautiful partnership that we still work on. He's a really active person in our group. He tours lots of people at his facility, and he installed one of our first commercial plants to replace that lagoon. So if you go to his farm, you'll see a partially dug lagoon still there, where he is now planning on using that as crop growth, but he originally was planning on doing that lagoon. As I mentioned, you know, we look to create value from this, and we wanted to solve manure's challenges in a sustainable way, but also open up revenue opportunities for our clients. We created a really good value proposition for our farms. And as an entrepreneur, this is what you need to do to give to your clients, to show them what their value proposition is. And we wanted to increase farm revenue most of all. That's what farms are looking to do. They are the original environmentalists. They're keeping their land, they're keeping it for generations, for hundreds of years they're on these farms. And what they want to do is, with that land, produce more revenue. And they have a limited number of years and crop cycles to do that on. So we really wanted to do that for them while reducing that cost I talked about earlier. So that, you know, $700,000 each year dealing with manure management, and you're not really left with anything of value there. You're just moving manure. So we wanted to reduce that, and then reduce other things like greenhouse gas emissions. And, you know, farms are really aware of how that is impacting them and their livelihood. What we ended up with our farms is a way to generate revenue through the sale of their concentrated manure feedstock. So right now, when you look at from our original beta units, we've come a long way to this digital footprint of manure, where we have our plant operating right beside the farm. We're taking data off of that, we're taking it to the cloud, and we're selling that for carbon credits. We are taking fertilizer off of those plants, and we're using it to increase their feed crop yields. So our farms will increase feed crops by up to 30% by just applying manure, the nutrients selectively, strategically, precision application. And they do that while the crop is growing, not flushing out the manure lagoon twice a year. We also feed into biogas plants. And so, they're making a wonderful amount of revenue selling manure feedstock to biogas plants for renewable natural gas or electricity. And then, of course, the herd health. So a lot of the data we produce is going to improve the herd health that we see on farms. Now, all of this information that we have, as I said, I came from outside the livestock industry, so I didn't really realize how all of this worked together in this circular economy and how we could improve the herd health, for instance, by using clean water through those barns. But our farms taught us all of that. So talking to all of the farms and in groups, going to conferences, meeting up with our farms on their sites, they let us know how they were using our system and how it benefited them. And a lot of this came as a surprise to me. We always say we're the first company in the world to digitize the hoof print of manure, providing actionable data. But they talked to us about how it improved herd health by eliminating their antibiotic use because they had, less bacteria going through the facility because we had clean water instead of manure flush, or other important animal healthcare data like the somatic cell counts improving and then getting more money for their milk. So all of that was taught to me by my farms. So I really think, coming from a technology background and then the farms with their entrepreneurial spirit, we were a good blend. I spent so much time listening to them. And I really think as an entrepreneur, the key is to really listen to your clients and key in on what their pain points are and really listen to how they think it should be solved because they have all the answers. Farmers, know everything about how things work, how they can improve things, and they know the answer they're looking for. And so, several of our farm clients commercialize their herds manure into new revenue streams for their farm. And one of our farmers, he calls himself an entrepreneur, and he sells what he branded as Bucky Bloom, which is organic plant nutrients, and he has them here made daily by cows in Wisconsin. He was selling this on Amazon, and he sells it at his local home hardware centers, where it's right on the shelf. You can see next to Miracle Grow and all the other plant foods and potting soils out of what he has done with our system. And that taught us everything we need to know about how we can sell this product. Now, as I mentioned, coming from outside the industry, we had a lot to learn about the agriculture sector, me specifically. Here I am looking really excited to be near some cows. I went to dozens of trade shows, talked to every farm manager I could speak to about what the problems are and how I could help them with water treatment technology. We now have systems across dozens of US states. We have a system in the United Kingdom. We are processing manure on the largest dairy farm in Lebanon. We are also working with other industry sectors, egg processing, biogas, mushrooms, truck washes. Like I mentioned, we work on a lot of biogas projects. So it has moved beyond our first dairy into many other industries. And I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to share the value of manure with a global audience. Now, I kind of laugh when I say fortunate enough because I dislike public speaking, and you can see me on a lot of stages. But this is another thing I had to overcome as the reluctant entrepreneur that I am. I had to go around and present what we had learned and spread the message. From, I was at the White House to Dubai, to Dublin, to Tokyo, presenting most recently, inside the Canadian Pavilion at COP27 this past November in Egypt.
Wow.
So I have really talked to a global audience. And we've had lots of industry recognition. Another thing I've had to kind of get over in my career is that sometimes you get recognition and you have to just get over your imposter syndrome and just accept it. The toughest thing is, getting into a global audience and having people talk about, me and what I've done, because really it's been such a team effort, and really a team effort with our farms. But I feel like I'm bringing everyone with me as I talk about this on a global stage. So now we are really laser focused on our work to transform manure into a real revenue opportunity for better farm economics. We want to create a net zero, nature positive food system together with our farms, and they are all in. We have proven that feeding the world does not come at the expense of the planet or a farmer's profitability. And right now, our machine learning algorithm has modeled a greenhouse gas emission map from manure in California's Central Valley. This is current, or this is actually 2019, where we were before we started looking at manure treatment in California. And then the impact we're seeing once we start treating manure in the Central Valley. So we really drastically remove greenhouse gas emissions. And with this comes revenue opportunity in the way of carbon credits, fertilizers, and renewable natural gas. California is the most progressive economy in this, but we are seeing this all over North America and indeed all over the planet. In Japan, everywhere I spoke of, is doing this. Middle East, you wouldn't think the Middle East is working on renewables, but they're very focused on renewables in that market. Renewable natural gas is a big push for them. So we're all looking at treating waste as a value opportunity. And as we do that, we remove any greenhouse gas emissions that we're seeing. So it's a wonderful, again, that circular economy. Either we sell this as fertilizer or we sell it as gas, and we create real opportunities and real money back to the farm where we think it should be going. This is an example, just a little tiny example of what we talk about in the Middle East, where we are looking at before manure treatment on one side and after manure treatment, where we've recirculated that water back onto those crops with the nutrients, and we're able to grow crops basically in the desert. And all of this is turning profitability for the farm, and for the first time growing fodder crops to feed their animals, and they've never done that before. So different things around the globe are all happening around reducing greenhouse gas emissions, all from an original bud of an idea of treating water from waste. Right now, we are processing 3.5 billion gallons of manure annually, and that mitigates over 300 tons of CO2 equivalent. 3 billion gallons of manure is hard to put your head around, but when you think about the amount of wastewater that goes through each municipality, this is a massive amount. All of our clients are committed to being socially responsible, and all of our farms are very focused, as I said, on the environment. And our installations, as well as treating this much waste, are directly impacting 10 of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Our goal is to transform 1 trillion gallons of manure and food waste bioliquids by 2050. So we are on a real push to do that. And the reason why is because we're talking about climate and water mitigation and those UN SDGs. So really, just to close out here, I want to say that this has become more than an entrepreneurship journey for me. This has been has become a passion to solve the world's biggest problems. And I'm passionately committed to creating a more sustainable planet. One of the biggest lessons I've learned along the way is that the climate crisis is not gender neutral. Women experience the biggest impacts of climate change. Women are responsible for collecting water and food for their families. And we see as climate change causes droughts and floods and extreme weather conditions, these tasks become more difficult. Women have to travel more distances to collect water. When I was in Egypt for COP27, I learned so much about the effects of climate change on women's and children's health. And women are at greater risks here. And as a woman entrepreneur, I really am trying to push myself, my company, and the industry of water treatment towards mitigating any effects we can on the planet. 80% of people displaced by climate change are women and children. Women are often more vulnerable to displacement than men because they don't have the same resources available to relocate. And so I really wanted to just touch on, how this entrepreneurship journey has become a real passion project for me in a personal sense. And as we've gone on to look to touch on why we work in manure, it has come on a long journey from our first initial treatment plants to now looking at a worldwide issue. You think you're going to start off with a problem that is affecting maybe just your local geography. Maybe you think this is a problem that just touches on the city that I live in. And then you move around the world and look at the whole macroeconomics of your situation, and you realize we're all in this together. We're all going through the same problems. All agricultural producers are dealing with the same types of issues. They all treat manure the same way all around the globe. Everywhere, livestock produces manure, of course. Everywhere on the planet, manure goes into lagoons as a traditional way of a low risk and easy way of dealing with manure. So everywhere on the planet needed a solution, and everywhere on the planet needed more clean water. So we definitely wanted to continue along this pathway and push, as I said, as far as I could, to make the people devoted to this in agriculture and women on the planet devoted to this proud of how far we've come. I'd like to challenge each and every one of us to be bold in our thinking and to work together to create meaningful change. I don't want to just work in Canada. I want to work around the globe and solve this problem for everyone in the world. And it takes really hard work and bold thinking. So I think, to sum up, the earth is what we have in common, and all of us work together on this planet to produce as much food with as little impact as possible.